Welcome to the 9th session of our 2022 to 2023 Heritage and Colonialism discussion group. This year's talks center around the theme Legacies of Injustice. The theme encompasses a broad range of injustices in both the past and the present, which are connected to a complex web of colonial issues. Without further delay, we would like to warmly welcome today's speaker, Kaian Lam. Kaian is affiliated with the Center for International Studies, ISCTE, University Institute of Lisbon, Portugal. She uses ethnographic methods to investigate African dietary histories, everyday cultures, food security, and international cooperation. She has an African Studies doctorate from ISCTE, a master's degree from the University of Lisbon, and an undergraduate degree from Universidade Católica Portuguesa. Kaian's topic today will be Cape Verdean oral tradition and discursive work. Welcome, Kaian. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind words. So today is April 25th, which is the 49th anniversary of Portugal's coronation revolution. So it's a very special day and a great honor on my part to be presenting on a topic that I have been investigating for quite some years. So I'll try to share screen. Can you see the slides? Okay, great. So thank you very much for organizing this session. And here is a tentative title of an article that I am writing: Cape Verdean Oral Tradition, Ecological Reflexivity, and Storyteller Citizen Advocate, a study of food and environmental governance. So maybe you're not familiar with the archipelago. It's in West Africa. For much of its pre-independence history, or before 1975, it was peripheral. It was an African port, and similar to a lot of the other West African countries, life was hard, and there was a serious problem of slavery, of lack of food, of bad governance. So in a way, we are familiar with the history of West Africa. Cape Verde is an integral part of the development of West Africa and its history. In archives, we find evidence of the first creolized population and the first African diaspora. The study, so my study, is based on 7 volumes of bóka noti, edited by Tomé Varela da Silva. Bóka noti is the most expansive and authoritative collection of Cape Verdean Creole literature available. I focus on environmental and food topics. The study interprets the discursive work performed by Cape Verdeans to reconcile with legacies of injustice, namely Portuguese colonial administration and the tribulations and trials peculiar to insular communities, that is to say, islands. How and in what ways does the lens of oral tradition or oral narrative provide us with opportunity to understand, analyze, and critique development processes and practices? I take up a certain proposal, which you might have heard of ecological reflexivity in the Anthropocene, which is a chic word now, by exploring the interventive powers of whom I call storyteller, citizen, advocate, highlighting some of the new channels of participation and possibilities of democracy that this brings about. Cape Verde is an island nation enveloped by the sea, and here is a very poetic description. Not black, nor white culturally, not entirely an agricultural society, nor a wholehearted migratory nation, not a sedentary demographic, nor a displaced people. How do you like it? In the discussion, perhaps you might want to share your view on this very poetic description that I came up with. Even as the archipelago rarely features on a map of Africa, there is a steady international interest in Cape Verde's history, society, and politics. Portuguese is the official language, but then most people speak Cape Verdean on a daily basis. And according to one study, it is the linguistic equipping of successive generations. And oral tradition is a national cultural character. So it is the edifice of a national cultural character. So Cape Verde has strong European influence. The major islands developed a long tradition of practicing small-scale agriculture, which does not make great sense because the country is surrounded by it's in the Atlantic Ocean. So in a way, this arrangement isolates Cape Verde from the African Sahel and rejects the African continent as a source of useful knowledge. The vast marine endowment has been underexplored and the inhabitants have suffered greatly. The oral tradition as a site of discursive reconciliation, of coming to terms with past choices, testing current practices, and sounding future possibilities. Oral narrative continually sustains the societal structure and the meaning-focused processes that legitimately renew the country's situated claim to both, so I emphasize to both African and European heritage. We agree that oral tradition, along with the historical, linguistic, and artistic heritage, is to be safeguarded. So we agree on this. How about adopting an active agent view of the story, the storyteller, and the audience? If we investigate more carefully, we will find that Cape Verdean oral tradition abounds with humour, positivism, and resilience in the face of adversities. Or if we want to be very theoretical, ecological reflexivity, which differs from simple reflexivity in at least two ways. The incorporation into human institutions of better ways to listen to ecological systems that have a different kind of voice, and an ability to rethink what core values such as justice, sustainability, and democracy mean in the context of an active and unstable Earth system. So according to the experts, we are changing from the Holocene to the Anthropocene. Humanity is brought back to the center of planetary dynamics in a new geological epoch, and the human actions are foreseen to determine in significant terms the planet's functioning. So what happens? The Anthropocene challenge is one that obliges scholars to see beyond the international or the global and to ponder human entanglements in all the enmeshed natural and social processes thereof within a larger existential world. And for the Holocene that previously sustains old international relations and global politics are now gone. This is probably not a very common IR view of things, but since I'm just getting into international relations, I'm still trying to find a bridge that will allow me to connect what I know and what I appreciate from my training in Europe and what I'm going to do as professionally in Macau, so in China. So if we're able to connect the international and the global with a better and more environmentally friendly understanding of natural, social, and greater processes, I think it would be the way ahead, the way forward. If the Anthropocene is a story, it is one of power and fragility, continuity, and change, humility, and boldness that underlies the need for a moral, reflective, and enlightened socio-natural relation. And how does we conceptualize oral narrative in this? Oral narratives have the ability to destabilize, defamiliarize, and inform the dominant way of engaging with nature. But while the debate is growing, research also tells us that there is a clear West concentration of knowledge production. And the marginal representativeness of global South contributions, this is something that we need to address and we need to admit. What the Anthropocene calls for is the intercrossing between the human world and the other than human world, and the acknowledgement of relations between human and other than human beings or more than human existence. The work of Pereira and Jebara, Portuguese and Brazilian, reunites the material and symbolic worlds of the Amazonian forest, reiterating that deeply relational ways of seeing and being always existed in indigenous knowledge. So how about Cape Verdean oral tradition? In the vast socio-ecology and the anthropocenary of Cape Verdean oral tradition, stories commonly begin with an indication of climatic condition. Usually it's famine. Tempo de fome is times when there is no food. A significant number of stories recorded in the bóka noti begin with a hardship, drought, famine, poverty, or other forms of degradation tending towards despair. So in order to facilitate understanding, I've translated everything into English. But if you're interested or if you have a good command of Portuguese, you will probably be able to understand most of what's written here. So once upon a time, there was a home on the land who, who had not been hungry for 7 years. He thought if he was without food, it was God's doing. So he made the decision to meet God in heaven. So that was a man, sorry for the spelling. So there was a man and he was certain that it was God's doing that he did not have food. So he decided to talk to God. The European-inspired Catholic faith has been strong in Cape Verde. Its influence reaches the most rural and mountainous areas of the major islands. To be rich is to be honorable and hardworking. That is a conscience and reflection of God. A situated understanding of food security is inseparable from environmental security and from a continuous appreciation of socially and culturally relevant ways of being, performing, seeing, feeling, and imagining. Now we're going to hear some stories. So fantasies, really. Please do not be very demanding. You might find that the stories do not make sense, but making sense is not the most important part. We try to appreciate those stories and to identify important elements and to try to see bigger logics. So not logics within one single story, but bigger logics. A theme evidenced in much of Cape Verdean oral narrative is the entanglement of historic, natural, material, and cultural heritage. In one story, someone who attempted to kill a royal made a difficult question, asking, how much does the moon weigh? How much water is there in the sea? And what is it that I was thinking? So this not only embraces an openness for imaginative forays, but also reflects the outward lookingness of even the most rural, remote communities. I have to say that most of these stories collected by the volume editor were from rural areas, from people who do not have the habit to write, but are able to express themselves in other ways. Effective, very effective. So even if you don't write, it doesn't mean that you're not able to express yourself effectively. How should we conceive of human beings' interconnection with the environment? To what extent do we dispose of the riches of the sea, of the land, and of the greater spaces? Do we own them? Note the following dowry arrangement. I will marry you with my daughter. So I will marry my daughter to you. I will give you 1/2 of the sea's delicacies, 1/2 of the sea's fish, all the vessels sailing on the sea. You will have 1/2 of everything. You will have 1/2. To what extent can we say that this is a fair dowry arrangement? The least that we can say is that the Cape Verdean vision is encompassing. Being secure, being landed, and being rich is not as simple as having independent means. So it's more than just having independent means to survive or to live a decent life. There is more to that. Here is a story of Peter, a young man who accepted and won every fight before he met an evil king. So he was a very competent man. He always fought and he won everything until he met an evil king. And the king made no haste and went to the vegetable garden to prepare the stuff to make a stew of Peter. So he wanted to put Peter into a stew. He brought back cassava, pumpkin, banana, getting ready to kill Peter and feast on him. But now, the king had a daughter. Daughter fell in love with Peter and wanted to run away with him. Just before the flight, the daughter of the king taught Peter how to negotiate with her father advantageously. So the king arrived. He came forward and told Peter, "Sir, Peter, take this watermelon seed from me. Plant the seed, let it grow this moment, give it life this moment. May it bear fruit now, to mature now, so that I can enjoy it." Peter replied, "Please give me everything marvelous." He gave Peter just that, so the king gave Peter just that, everything marvelous. Peter planted a seed, and from there he reaped a pickaxe, a house. So the seed grew, gained life, and bore fruit, which Peter offered to the king. The marvelous gifts from the land do not end there. Peter also reaped water from cracked rock. The king gifted him even more marvelous tools, and Peter got more water still. Being evil-minded, the king did not abandon the idea of putting Peter into a stew. Peter and the king's daughter fled. Several times the king almost caught up with them, but the pair magically transformed their horse and themselves into other things: a church, a saint, an orange tree, an old man that sells oranges, the sea, a boat, a sailor, etc. The story continued fabulously before it culminated in a happy ending for all. The king abandoned his cooking scheme, so no more cooking of Peter. Peter lost the bad memory, so he could not recall anything, he did not remember anything, and he married the king's daughter. This particular story reveals facets of island life worth further discussion. Water was and continues to be a scarce resource in Cape Verde. The capacity to obtain and control its usage is of no small importance to our understanding of effective power, good governance, and social well-being. The incredulous transformation, a horse into an orange tree, a human being into an orange, a horse into the sea, a human being into a boat, points to double centrality of maritime and agricultural practices. The shape-shifting of humans into animals and natural elements in a combined framework of literal and metaphorical narratives allow humans to connect and experience other worlds and to assess complex cultural imaginaries. This wondrous ability of oral tradition entails the exercise of reflexivity, a capacity to be something different when necessary, rather than just do something different. Fascinating, isn't it? The stew that is never finished hints at a never-ending pursuit of food security. From Portuguese discovery of the first islands in the mid-15th century up to perhaps more contemporary times, Cape Verde inherited a negative heritage. which is a marker of the island's history, society, and politics. So there was no food, people had to suffer, they had to find ways to survive and to live life and to put the wisdom, to use their wisdom to solve problems, and it has become a negative heritage. The following story tells of a belligerent ox that killed every human who came its way. Its name was Bulimundo. So the people of the land feared it so much that they were not able to fetch firewood or to do farm work. They brought the case to the king. So the people were afraid of the ox and they brought the case to the king. It was a difficult case, but then a 14-year-old boy came forward and proposed to conquer the ox. The boy only asked for an instrument to play sweet melodies with and a bag of maize. And the boy sang to the ox, Bulimundo, Bulimundo, the king sent me here. You are to marry a docile cow. Here, my sweet viola, have some maize. Here, my sweet viola, have some more maize. And the boy managed to collar the ox and rode it away from the fertile land towards the palace. That way people could go to the land and do their farm work and to reap food, right, to reap harvest. The boy's enticement was a success. Ox was killed to the great joy of all. Hooray, hooray, our land is free, finally free of the ox. Now we can go to the farm, we can work our land, because the ox will no longer chase after us. We are done with it, thanks to the courageous boy. We will have bountiful harvest. We will not go hungry, because the ox that made us suffer so is no longer here to cause more trouble. Now, in order to reward the boy, the king offered his daughter in marriage. So as a reward for the bravery of the boy. The head of the ox was made into a specimen for display in the public garden. People took home portions of boiled meat. The malice of the ox outlived his bodily existence and kept pounding the pot lid. The general sentiment, however, is that the community was glad to have peace. The beauty of this story is in the ingenious conquer of a malicious force. The boy allured the ox with two symbolic elements of local culture, one musical and the other edible. Music is an integral part of Cape Verdean culture. Besides love, separation, the sea and the islands, perhaps some of the most prominent themes of many famous songs, people also poeticize the everyday, the mundane, and the earthly. Taking the interpretation further, we can reconfigure humanity's interconnectedness with the non-human world as that of peace maintenance. To remove the ox is to make farm work possible and to make life possible. Now, here's one more story. This has to do with a court case between two farmers. There was a rich, miserly farmer who always wanted to take advantage of his poor paid laborer, so the poor farmer. The rich farmer was thin while the other one was fat. Not understanding why, the rich farmer resolved to confront his poor neighbor. The poor man turned to him and replied, "You know, I grind my maize, I make my maize meal without seasoning, without milk, nothing. I eat my maize meal quietly," sorry for the typo, "my maize meal quietly, I pass round the back of your house and I smell the rich smell of your food. My nose inhaling it all and I'm full." So hearing this explanation from the poor farmer, the rich farmer was not satisfied. He was furious. He was convinced that his laborer, his poor neighbor, robbed him of his food. So he took the robber to court and won the case. The poor farmer was afflicted. The judge did not believe in the poor farmer. A young boy offered to be the lawyer of the poor farmer and advocate for him on the payment day. It was a tough trial. So the poor farmer lost the case, but just before he had to pay, he had the help of a young boy. The young man began saying that since last night it rained abundantly on the land, he was going to get the pounded maize and cooked fava ready for sowing. So, but it's not possible, right? So it's already prepared, if it's already food that is prepared and food that is already cooked, you can't really sow and you can't really make the food grow again. The judge reminded the boy severely that it was impossible, so the case was lost. Now the poor farmer had to pay. He extended his hand and passed the fine over to the judge. The judge then put the fine in his pocket. As he turned to leave, the young man put his hand into the pocket of the judge and took the money back. His reasoning was simple. If smelling your neighbor's food was stealing, if pounded maize and cooked fava could grow again into plants, then the simple act of handing in a fine already completed the court order. So if the smell of food is food, then extending is receiving. The pair of farmers, one who was rich but adventurous, and the other was poor but sober, and the outcome of the court dispute between them is a reflection of the conflict that exists between different ways of being. It somehow suggests that poverty is often buttressed by ingenuity and optimism, but is not immune to distrust, unfair judgment, and continuous exploitation. The young man represented a force for good that was beyond the institutions or the systems. He employed nothing other than local knowledge and common sense. Oftentimes, what is just simply the logical and the right thing to do is what is just. One more story, yet another story. There was a boy who lost his father when he was young. His mother took care of him with great sacrifice. As he gained age and physical force, he proposed to use his father's axe, his father's tool, to go fetch wood from the forest in order to make a living. That way he would relieve his mother's burden. He did as he promised. The family no longer had to borrow firewood from neighbors and to beg food from neighbors. Then one time he climbed a tree with many branches, some of which extended out to the sea. The boy let the axe drop into the sea. He cried for his carelessness until a fish rose to the surface and offered to help. The fish said this. The boy said this. I'm sad because the axe is a remembrance from my father. Besides, it helps me to earn my daily bread and sustain myself and my mother. Now my axe is at the bottom of the sea, and I cannot reach for it. The fish heard him and consoled him. No, please do not be sad, because I will fetch your axe. This said, the fish took a deep dive before emerging with a golden axe. Holding the golden axe, the fish asked the boy, "Look at this, is this your axe?" The boy was not relieved and had to say, No, my axe is made of steel, and the one you hold is not. The fish repeated his good act 3 times, the first time with a golden axe, the second time with a silver one, the third time with an old steel one. This last being the boy's possession. So the boy's axe was a steel axe. In the end, the boy was rewarded for his honesty and given all the 3 axes. This story is uncomplicated, it's simple. The family structure, wherein a woman is the economic pillar tending to her children, is very common in Cape Verde. The death of the male breadwinner, and moreover the absence of a father figure, is a major cause of intergenerational poverty on the islands. What the story reflects well is the reciprocation of gratitude, evidenced by the boy's proposal to fetch fuel from the forest. The practice as described in the story continues to this day in less developed areas of Cape Verde. Towards the end of the tale, the fish is said to reappear constantly to revisit the same spot where it met the boy. This fabulous character personifies divine hope in the vastness of the Atlantic. Fish, often consumed in coastal areas, and the object of many creole names, is a source of familiarity, relief, and faith in what may otherwise be very bad living in a hostile, barren, and desiccant surrounding. Now, this should be the last story that I have for you today. The story began on the beach where a wolf was fishing. A whale teased him and did not take him seriously. The whale also did not believe that the wolf was strong enough to fish a lot, as he claimed himself to be able to do. So the challenge was, tell me if you still have the strength that you had before. The wolf then dared the whale to take a challenge. So if you don't believe me, then you take a challenge. And they agreed to meet soon. The wolf left and went into the wood. This time he met a lion. The lion provoked him and asked if he had lost his strength of his youth, to which the wolf answered valiantly. The pair agreed to challenge one another soon. So that way the wolf agreed to 2 challenges. For his scheme, the wolf made a long rope. He arranged for the whale to meet at the sea and the lion in the woods. The whale and the lion pulled at the rope on each side so hard that the lion got dragged to the beach rocks and almost fell over. Just when the lion realized where he got to, it sat low and sunk its claws deep into the ground. He pulled hard backwards and brought the whale on land, lying in the sand. So that way, both the whale and the lion lost. With this, the wolf got double prizes. He gained a feast of fish from the whale and a great number of animals from the lion. The whale is a cultural symbol in Cape Verde. It is an inseparable symbol of maritime and seafaring tradition for a significant period of the island's history. The story did not end here, but the wolf's wit was evident throughout the story. If we take the wolf as an ingenious human being, then he was a final winner at every turn. Now, I think I need to conclude. What I can say is that oral tradition is a site of discursive experiments and a laboratory of polycentric governance. It sounds very fancy, but if we have to be theoretical, then we have to be. If the Anthropocene affects all humans and non-humans, we need to replace the social human hierarchy with a planetary system invested with deliberative processes that heed the desperate cries of living things and distress signals of the Earth system. Given that reflexivity is essential to navigate the democratic Anthropocene, which will demand the promotion of new global socio-natural relations. We sincerely believe that the centering of productive relationships across times, socio-economic conditions, the natural and the social, the narrative and the non-narrative, the visible and the invisible, contributes to better global governance in the Anthropocene. The changes before us are unprecedented, surely. It is important to realize that human nature and security are not divided, and that they do not only encounter one another instrumentally, so there is more to the encounter. To situate oral narrative in the Anthropocene and to eco-centralize forms of relationality that lies at the margins of modernity is the researcher's job. So accordingly, ecological reflexivity at the institutional level entails listening to a dynamic and active surrounding so as to be better able to reconsider justice, sustainability, and other key principles, and to anticipate and respond to ecological threats at the earliest opportunity. An oral tradition, therefore, is an institutional stage for the activation of community consciousness, an emergent site of political contestation in the Anthropocene. If scientists and other experts are considered the engines of formal agency in the original framework, our framework is an inverted model in which the public, the rural, the female, and the illiterate are the central agents of ecological reflexivity with the original ordinary knowledge and layman perspectives. We do not argue for moral superiority, we do not, but for a democratization of the access to policy-making processes for the Anthropocene, not only for the citizen scientists, but also for the citizen advocates. And that way we've come to the end of this presentation, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.